Hi everyone, ya sabes que kalos tirsate to another episode of Dimitra's Dishes. Today we're going to be making a low-carb lasagna that's also vegetarian. It's going to be layered with eggplant and filled with a spinach and feta filling. Decadent, delicious, easy to make, a dish that the whole family will love. And you can actually substitute zucchini for the eggplant. It's totally up to you, or do a combination of the two. I will talk about that as we move along with the recipe. Let's get started. So if you're using eggplant, be sure to choose beautiful purple eggplant that has shiny skin and is firm and doesn't have too many markings on it. Sometimes you'll see these tan, brownish markings. If there's a few, just like this one, it's perfectly fine, but if it's full of brown spots, you don't want to choose it. Similarly, if you find a soft eggplant, you don't want to use that either. You want it to be nice and firm with shiny skin. That's how you know you will get the best flavor. Make sure to wash them really well with some warm water and maybe some vegetable spray or some vinegar, depending on what you prefer, and then dry them really well, and then slice them lengthwise in about 1/2 inch slices. You could go a little bit thicker with 3/4 of an inch. The thicker you cut them, the longer they're going to take to cook, so keep that in mind. But you don't want to cut them too thin where they're going to fall apart and melt and turn into mush in the lasagna. You want them to kind of hold their shape so you know that you're eating a delicious eggplant. For the eggplant haters out there, it's perfectly fine. You could substitute zucchini for this, and you would do the same exact thing. Slice the zucchini lengthwise, 3/4 of an inch thick or 1/2 an inch thick, and then just set them aside. With zucchini, the thing is you don't have to salt them and set them aside, which is what you do next with the eggplant. Once you slice them, you want to sprinkle them with a liberal amount of salt, and then you can put them in a colander, stack them in all together, and set them aside while you make your filling for about 10-15 minutes. That's going to draw out any bitter juices that are going to be in there. And once they're done draining, you're just going to want to pat them dry with a paper towel to absorb all those bitter juices. If you want to take an extra step of rinsing them and then patting them dry, I'm going to leave that up to you. If you're using big eggplants, you're going to need 3 of them, 2 or 3. It's better to have a little extra than to run out. But since these eggplants are a little bit on the smaller side, I'm using 4. And like I said, any extra eggplant will be used up in either dips or something like that. So delicious. Let's move on to making the filling. The filling is super easy. I have a cast iron skillet that's heating over medium heat. I'm just going to finely chop a small onion. You can also substitute green onions, also known as scallions, or spring onions, 5 or 6 of those, or 2 leeks. It's up to you. The onion is going to add a little bit of sweetness to the filling. Season with a little pinch of salt, and then go and add about 3 or 4 tablespoons of really good olive oil. And then just cook the onions over medium heat for about 7-8 minutes, or until they're nice and soft and golden. Next, you're just going to want to grate 2 or 3 garlic cloves and put them in there until they're warmed through. I like to grate my garlic in big batches in the food processor, actually not grate it, but finely grind it. So this is a little bit frozen, so it's going to take a few more seconds, but if you grate it fresh, literally you put it in and then you should start adding the spinach after about 10 seconds, because if garlic burns, it gets very bitter. Smells so good. Then I have about 10 ounces of spinach, baby spinach leaves. You don't even have to chop them, but if you want to, you can. And you're going to add them in 2 or 3 batches. Each time one batch wilts down, you can go ahead and add the next one. And you can season each batch with a little bit of black pepper and salt. And keep mixing so that way the onions and garlic that are on the bottom don't burn. This is about 10 ounces of spinach. That's all I had, but I have put up to 1 pound of spinach in this filling. And in my opinion, 1 pound is probably even better. And it really cooks down in no time. Turn off the heat, and then you can add a heaping teaspoon of dried dill, or you could finely chop a bunch of fresh dill and just put it in here. Mix it all up, and then just take it off of the heat. This is already smelling so good. I'm just gonna get it into this big mixing bowl. So I have a big mixing bowl here, and before I add the spinach to it, I'm gonna add 8 ounces of cream cheese. This is already nice and soft. It's been at room temperature for about an hour. And I'm just gonna break it up a little bit, but the heat of the spinach and the veggies is gonna melt it even more. I like to add a few crushed red pepper flakes to the filling, about a quarter teaspoon up to a teaspoon. It's up to you how much you want to add. And then 8 ounces of really good quality feta cheese. Just crumble that in. If you have any leftover roasted veggies like asparagus or string beans, you can roughly chop those and add them to the filling, as well as any sauteed mushrooms you could go ahead and add in here. You can make this as hearty as you want. And then I'm just gonna add about half a cup of shredded mozzarella. You could use white cheddar, any cheese that melts well. And that's it, the filling is done. I do have 2 eggs listed as part of the filling, but the last time I made this, I just left them out because I forgot. I was making this in a real big hurry, and it just tasted delicious. So I just left the eggs out, but I'll leave it up to you. Give it a taste. Doesn't need anything else. I'm gonna set this aside. Now we're gonna start cooking our eggplant. So get a cast iron skillet really nice and hot over medium-high heat, and you can put a couple tablespoons of olive oil on the bottom, maybe a quarter cup or so. You do need some oil for this. This is my favorite way to prepare the eggplant, but you can also bake these if you wanted to in a 420-degree oven for about 20-25 minutes or until they're nice and golden and soft. So make sure you pat them dry, otherwise the oil is going to start flying all over the place. You go ahead and put about 4 in there, depending on the size. And we're going to cook them about 2 minutes per side or until they're golden and soft. Okay, so be sure to use enough oil if you're pan frying these, so that way they become nice and golden and they're super tender. If you cut back on the oil, they're going to be a little bit on the dry side, and they're also going to end up being a little bit tough. So, don't skimp out on the oil. If you are, then it's best to bake them in the oven. Brush some oil on them and bake them until they're nice and soft and tender on baking trays at about 425 degrees Fahrenheit. So now the last component of this dish is the marinara sauce. So I like to buy store-bought sauce, so that way it cuts back on the prep time, but you can definitely make your own. It's very easy to make, or use your own if you make it. And I like to doctor it up with a little bit of mild harissa. This is one of my favorite brands. This is not sponsored, but I just love it. It's not too spicy, it's not bitter, it just has a beautiful combination of flavors. And harissa is basically a roasted red pepper sauce that has some spice and warmth to it, and it is gonna add much more flavor to this sauce than if I was just using the plain, but just plain will do too. That's really all I do. I just mix it all up. You can definitely pass this through a food processor or a blender to get it more smooth if your family prefers a more smooth sauce, but this is not too chunky, so it's fine. But again, it's up to you. So now, it's best to use a 9 by 13 inch baking dish, but all of my ceramic trays are either in the fridge or cracked. So I'm using this big round one. Let me measure it. It is 13 inches or 33 centimeters. So metal or ceramic trays are best because we're gonna bake this at 425 degrees, and I have had glass pans crack in the oven, and I don't want that to ever happen again. So I just use them for like baking at lower temperatures. So you're gonna take half of the sauce and spread it on the bottom of your pan. If you want to chop up some Kalamata olives and dollop them over the sauce, that's a very great combination. Then you want to take your perfectly cooked eggplant, or if you're using zucchini, you can use zucchini instead, and layer them over the sauce. If you're using a 9 by 13 inch pan, about 4 layers on the bottom, if the eggplants are on the larger side, will be perfect. Once you're done pan frying the eggplant slices, you want to transfer them to a tray that's lined with paper towels, so that way it could absorb any of that excess oil that's going to be on the eggplant. But salting them well keeps them from getting greasy and oily. So we have a layer of eggplant on the bottom. Then I'm going to take half of the filling and just dollop it here and there. It looks like it's not going to be enough, but this filling is so rich that it should be enough. If you wanted double the filling, you could definitely make more. Like I said, I wish I had more spinach. I would have added a pound of spinach instead of the 10 ounces that I put in. But this is a rich filling. I'm just gonna use this offset cake decorating spatula to kind of spread it everywhere. And like I said, you can add more veggies to this. The more veggies, the better. Then we're gonna put another layer of eggplant. and the rest of the filling. Beautiful. And since I have some of these eggplant slices left over, I'm just going to top the filling with the eggplant slices. It doesn't have to cover everything. If it does, it does. If it doesn't, that's fine too. And then the rest of the marinara sauce. And then lastly, we're gonna add some shredded mozzarella on the top, about a cup of it. You can mix in some kefalograviera or some Parmesan cheese for more depth of flavor. That's it. It's ready for the oven. My oven is preheated to 425 degrees Fahrenheit. This is gonna bake on the center rack for about 30-35 minutes or until the cheese is melted. Really, everything is fully cooked. It just needs to warm through and come together. And then you're gonna take it out of the oven and let it sit at room temperature for about 15-20 minutes so everything can set and it'll be ready to serve. So the eggplant lasagna is finally ready. It actually took 45 minutes in my oven to bake this time. I did raise the temperature to 475 degrees for the final 10 minutes, just so that way the juices that were released can sort of dry up just a little bit. Once it comes out of the oven, again, you want to let it sit at room temperature for at least 15-20 minutes, so that way the sauce gets to thicken a little bit and everything holds together. Then it'll be ready to serve. It should be very easy to slice through because everything is just so nice and soft. So just serve it as is. Just a few tips before we move on. The eggplant, if you're frying it in the pan, once again, I'm gonna say that make sure that there's enough olive oil in there. You want a nice layer of olive oil covering the whole bottom of the pan, so that way the eggplant really gets nice and soft and tender. If you don't put enough oil, like I said, it's going to be dry and it just won't taste good. In that case, just go ahead and bake it. You could also cook them on a grill. It's up to you. The thicker they are, the longer they're going to take, but cook them at medium-high heat. They're going to take maximum 3 to 4 minutes max on each side, but flip them over every 2 minutes to prevent them from burning, and also move them around because there are hot spots in the pan. Basically, that's it. You can make a double batch of this, or if you want to make this into 2 smaller baking pans and freeze one, once it cools down, you could wrap it really tightly in plastic wrap, and it'll stay fresh in the freezer for a month or 2. Thaw it out in the refrigerator and then warm it in the oven and serve it to your family if you have one of those really busy nights. It's nice to have, ready to serve food in the freezer. Basically, that's it. If I remember any other tips, I'll list them on the blog post. It is time for the taste test. So good. I would serve this with some toasted bread just to dip that sauce in. It's so flavorful. I would next time add some Kalamata olives for a little bit of a kick and a little bite. It's just delicious. The exact measurements are on the website, dimitrasdishes.com. Head on over to the website to print the recipe, make it, let me know what you think. And if you want to learn how to make some nice homemade bread to serve with this, click over here and I'll see you right over there. Yes, us.